I really feel like I've forgotten something today because everything's sort of run a little bit more smoothly, and I'm actually up here earlier than I'm supposed to be, but I'm pretty interested in what we're going to hear about today, so I'm hoping we can give Glenn just a couple of extra minutes, maybe even if that's just for questions at the end. Now, we can see from what's behind me, we got a bit of a tough bastard going to get up and have a chat to us today, and I say that with all reverence, because the man's done something that I couldn't even consider myself at this moment. Kevin was telling me while we were waiting for breakfast that when he did his 100-mile run, some people from New Guinea came over and a competing team, and at the end of it, while Kevin is bent over, exhausted, asking them, well, what did you think of our run, they were quick to say, well, it's pretty flat kind of terrain here. And Glenn's walked through the terrain that they do, and I'm going to stop there and just pass straight over to him.
Yeah, Glen Azar. So for those that don't know me, I guess my main thing these days is I'm an adventurer. So I travel all around the world. Kokoda is just one of the trips that I run. But I do everything from Kilimanjaro to dog sitting in the Yukon, so I'll take you through some photos of that sort of stuff. Has anyone been to New Guinea? No one. All right. Whenever I train people for Kokoda, and as we're saying, I've done 50 of them now, everyone always tell me how they're going to train on hills, and even around Toowoomba, there's some pretty good hills. And I'll tell them that you'll never run into anything in Australia that's even remotely similar to what they have in New Guinea, and that's just a fact. So there's very, very few flat spots along the track or anywhere in New Guinea. I do a few trips over there. No matter who I talk to, because I take people from all around Australia, they always tell me about some hill outside their house that they're pretty sure is similar. So till we get over there and they go, holy, it's not. So, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Just by way of how I got here is I gave a talk at the Toowoomba LinkedIn community group. I don't know if anyone's involved in that. Yeah. And that talk came about because Brendan, who runs that, sent me a text and said, can you talk about something for 10 minutes, something motivational? I said, okay, so it was a pretty broad. So I just got up and spoke. And then Steve contacted me and said, I like that talk, can you give the exact same talk to us? And the truth is I can't, because I made that talk up on the spot. Because, you just got to sort of flow with your group. And that group was a big group, 100 people, so it was quite a big group. And so just talk about whatever. But look, my passion is really these days is adventure and is coaching. So I coach people, particularly in small businesses. So my history is that I was in the army for 17 years, which taught me nothing about business, but taught me a lot about managing people. And I started to understand that that's what business is about. It's about managing self and managing people. So I started to get into this coaching space. So I had a gym for some years called Fighting Fit, which I sold in 2013. And in view of how many gyms are in Toowoomba in the last 18 months, maybe that was a good decision. I don't know. It was a lucky decision, but it just sort of happened as it happened. I'm going to try and... Look. So I run things now. What I've done is I've tied my adventure business into my coaching. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. I don't coach many people in Toowoomba, to be honest. I mostly work in Brisbane. And I've got some clients in America, England, Melbourne, because the day of the internet with Skype and that sort of stuff, your business can change. And then I've started to tie in adventure. So I run things like this summit that I'm running on the Sunshine Coast, which has talks and stuff involved and workshops, and then actually get out and do things. So I've started to tie the business together. What I've put up here, which I'm not going to show you, is a really cool video, but I found out we don't have sound, so there's no point. So I could show you the video and just ad-lib the words for you, but there's really no point to that. Just want to tell you a bit about who we are and what we do, I guess. This is my daughter, Alyssa. Some of you may have heard of her. Alyssa's just turned 18. She's done the Kokoda track 4 times now because she does a bit of work with me. She did Kokoda the first time when she was 8. We did Everest Base Camp when she was 10 the first time. She's been there a few times now. She's climbed the highest mountain in South America, Africa, and so on. And she's made 2 attempts to climb Mount Everest itself this year and last year, which were both quite tragic events. And so she does a bit of talking as well around basically, how you get up and keep going when shit goes wrong, which for business people, shit goes wrong all the time. So everyone here is in business, yeah, of some sort, yeah. So, and you would understand that the current economy, particularly in Toowoomba, is really tough. Business is tough. Who's been in business longer than 10 years? How many businesses, do you know how many businesses survive the 10-year mark? in Australia? 2%. That's how bad the stat is at the moment. Tell me any sport that you would get into where the chance of death is at 98%. Probably none. Like, all of you, including myself, have got to be a bit crazy, don't we? And then what you have especially in communities like Toowoomba sometimes, is your staff and other people think you're making this whole shit tin of money, and then they all want a piece of that when things start to go right. And I've had all those experiences. So that's why my passion is about that stuff. There's no reason to show you that photo other than I go dog sledding in the Yukon right up on the Alaskan border, and this is a trip that we did this year where we take people away and they get their own team of dogs. So you get 8 dogs and you have to look after those dogs and go out on expeditions with them for 7 days. And it's the most amazing trip in the world, but that's another story. And my partner actually owns these 2 businesses. So she has a women's only gym and she runs a cafe called Primal Pantry, which is on Hill Street next to Grand Central where all the roadworks are. So I guess as far as the business community goes, that's what we're involved in Toowoomba. My main passion these days is this. So this is taken on Brigade Hill. This is only taken a month ago. So what I do now mostly is I run a PTSD program, post-traumatic stress program for soldiers returning from Afghanistan and Iraq initially, is how we started, because the military and the government in general does little to actually help these guys once they leave the system. So we've stretched that all the way back now. So this guy here, he's 70, so he's a Vietnam vet. So we've stretched all the way back to Vietnam now, working with these guys. Statistically, there are 3 times as many soldiers have killed themselves since Afghanistan than what died in Afghanistan. So there's obviously a problem out there that we're not addressing. So I've gotten involved with this charity called Mates for Mates, and we're actually trying to bring it to Toowoomba, and I think we'll succeed over the next 6 months or so. And Mates for Mates is financed by the Queensland RSL, and they run these free programs. But it's not just for the soldiers, it's for their families. It's for mums and dads, their kids, their wives. We run everything from physical training through to free psychological services. And it's the only business doing that, or it's the only charity doing that. We link in with other similar charities, so we do a lot of work with Soldier On to help them out. We certainly, when you work in charity spaces like this, you're not competing with anyone. Anyone that's in this space we work with, because we're trying to save people's lives at the end of the day. I've had guys, the Army has a very poor understanding of what happens to people when they go to war. So I did my infantry commander's course with a young guy who was a bomb disposal guy, and he lost both of his arms, 1 leg and half of his face, including his left eye, in Afghanistan. And so he's pretty screwed up, and he's pretty much been sort of cast away because there's not much the Army can do with him. And recently he went in to get a set of glasses. You can look this story up. His name's Michael Lydiard. And he asked for 2 sets of glasses because his one eye has some issues. And the Army came back and said, well, you're only entitled to 1 pair of glasses because that's what the military writing says. So he's going to war with them over that. And as he said to me, because we were on Kokoda, he's walked Kokoda, this guy, it's not about the $300 for the glasses, it's the principle. If they're willing to screw me over $300 with all of these obvious injuries, what about these guys with PTSD and so on? So this trip I just did here was probably the toughest trip I've done. We had the best weather, it was the driest conditions, it was amazing. But it was tough because I took a couple of commandos over there who were involved in a raid on the Taliban at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they got into a firefight with a guy from a room that was back and forward. They threw 2 grenades into that room and he was still firing at them before they finally got him out. But in the process, they found out and didn't know at the time that he had 5 children in the room with him, and he was using them as a shield, aged from 4 to 13, and all 5 of them were killed. So the Army's response to that, the military response and the government's response was they charged them for manslaughter, and they were facing 21 years jail, and the court case went for 2 years before they were cleared. So they're pretty screwed up. So, those are sort of tough things that I deal with. And what it's done is it's changed my whole belief system around business and everything else. And why I say that is, we're just talking about the Toowoomba Disability Awards. I've got an 11-year-old son who's autistic and has some mental impairments. He's got a mental age of about 5. He goes to Toowoomba West. I think I'm a pretty tough guy, or I used to think I was a pretty tough guy. But once you start to get some real life experience and you face things like some of these blokes have faced, or I face things with my son, I realise I'm not as tough as I thought I was. So whatever situations we go through in business, there's someone who's going through worse stuff. Particularly when I take Christian to school, there's 131 kids at that school. He's the best, he can walk and talk. There are kids in fully disabled in wheelchairs who can't do either. And they haven't done anything wrong. That's just how they were born. So when you and I, in business in particular, are having a shit time and thinking life's really tough, I can guarantee there's a kid at that school, or there's people on these trips that would swap your worst day for their best day at the drop of a hat. And I don't say that to say that your problems aren't real or my problems aren't real. I just say sometimes we've got to have a bit of reality around what it is that we do. So look, I'm a big fan of quotes. In my coaching business, I run a program called the Game Changers, which is, I guess, not dissimilar to what we're doing here. I run it in Brisbane at the moment. It's where groups of business people get together and we meet and we talk. These sort of meetings, I know it's not high on your charter, but these sort of meetings need to be about supporting each other. They need to be real conversations. So you guys need to be able to talk to each other about real problems that you've got. To me, that's the whole point of not having two similar businesses in a room. Because what generally happens in business is people ask how we're going and we say we're going great, we're killing it, and then we're lying awake at night wondering how we're going to pay our bills. That's the reality of business sometimes. And there'll be someone else in this room who's been there that can help you out. And so that's what the Game Changer program is about. I put a lot of these quotes up. You know, some people like this stuff, some people hate it. I don't really care, because if you don't like it, you just won't read it. That's the joys of Facebook. Is anyone not big on social media here, honestly? Yeah, you need to get on it. Like, so, to be honest, we were just talking about this. Newspapers, TV and all that sort of stuff, if you're spending, I'm sorry if anyone that works in that industry, if you're spending big money on that stuff for advertising your business, you're in the wrong market these days. Particularly if you're marketing to anyone 40 years and under, because they're on social media. And they're on social media and it's instant. They want instant gratification. They want to know what's going on. You've got to learn how to engage people through things like Facebook and LinkedIn, and it's really cheap to do at the moment. It'll change over the next 2 years. I've been studying this quite heavily through a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk, who runs a media company in America, and he's the cutting edge of all things social media. And his social media strategies are amazing. And if you get it right, you know, to me these days, to spend thousands of dollars on TV advertising doesn't have its bang for buck anymore. Depending on the size of your business, of course. But the main reason I got into coaching people as well was, does anyone here have a business coach or has tried one? Is anyone a business coach in the room? No, good. I hired 4 different business coaches when I first started Fighting Fit, because I had no idea about anything except I knew how to fight, which is the idea of the program. I was a former amateur and professional boxer, so I trained fighters and I trained corporate fighters. Blokes like Michael McNabb from McNabb Constructions, those guys getting in, who've got plenty of money and getting in and punching the crap out of each other, and doctors and lawyers, it's crazy. I don't know why they do it. I do it because I'm not as intelligent as them, but these guys are doing it too. And I had no idea how to run a business, so I started to employ business coaches. And most business coaches, and I'm going back 13 years, back then I was paying $1,500 a month. We were charging about $44 an hour for a PT session. So I'll let you do the math on how many clients I needed to get in, and I learnt nothing. I learnt zero from any of them, because what they'd all learnt, my experience back then was a bouncing ball model of how to coach people. And my business, if it didn't fit the bouncing ball model, or if I was having real stress, like I was having, like, how the hell do I pay my bills, they didn't have the answers for me. So I went and found the answers myself, started learning, and that's how I coach people. I don't bouncing ball model. I use things, I use quotes, and these are the sort of quotes that mean a lot to me, because one thing I'm really, really crap at is quitting. I've probably gone on longer than I should. My business nearly went bankrupt in 2009 due to a bad investment. I invested in a really big company, the biggest adventure company or corporate adventure company in Australia at the time. We were the king hitters. We were taking everyone from Koshi. We took all that Koshi Channel 7 crew in 2006. Kevin Rudd, Mal Meninga, you name it, Alan Border, they all came to. If you wanted anyone who wanted to come to Kokoda with us, or wanted to go to Kokoda, they did it with us. We were the big guys. Anyway, long story short, the GFC came along. The major shareholder was touching the till, and we lost every dollar we'd ever saved, my wife and I, through the army. Every dollar gone, because I had no idea about the books. I had no idea about. I signed contracts that I probably shouldn't have signed. Danny Clifford from Clifford Law made a lot of money out of me trying to fix up the mistakes I made, because when you're in the army, you shake hands with people and that's your bond. In Australia, go back 20 or 30 years, that was your bond. But times have changed. And I sign and I check things now all the time. So that's how I sort of got involved. So I started my adventure business in 2010. So GFC started in 2009, that's when it first hit us. And in 2010, I decided to open a business aimed at corporates, because that's what I do, corporate contracts. Mostly. Sometimes individuals come into it, but mostly corporates. And everyone told me I was mad, and I probably was. I had to sit down with my lawyers and accountants and draw a bankruptcy line. This is all the money that's owed to you from these guys and other people that you're probably not going to get. And at the bottom end of that line is all the money that you owe people. And we were 50-50 about whether we kept going or not. I don't know if any of you have been in that position, but it's tough. You know, you've got to make real big calls on yourself. So that's where I was. Again, I'm really crap at quitting, so I decided I was going to fight. My wife disagreed and just felt like we should chuck it all in and call bankruptcy. We spent about 12 months fighting through that, and we ended up separated. So I've been separated since the end of 2010 as a result of that, because so much had happened, and we get on really well, but it was just a tough time, and that's what happens in business sometimes. And so I fought out of it. I started doing 18-hour days. I was in mopping the gym floors at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's what has to be done. I see all these young kids get into business now, and they think it's really easy. They think that they're going to make all this money, and they think that even when I sold the gym, the girl that bought the gym was 29, and in the first 4 months of buying the gym, she had 2 months off. She went to Bali for a month, because that's what you do when you buy a business. Yeah, you got all the time in the world because you're the boss. It doesn't work that way, and the business is struggling. Her business is struggling as a result. And the only advice I've given her is you've got to be there. You've got to be in your business. And then all these business coaches kept saying you've got to work on your business, not in your business. Like, what a load of crap. That's a real good catch cry that business coaches always use. But in that first couple of years, that's just garbage. And if things go wrong, none of your employees care, because they'll go and find another job. But you care because you're going to go bankrupt. You're going to be drawing that bankruptcy line. So to me, that was the biggest thing that I learned, is that you've got to be the first to work and the last to leave when the shit hits the fan. And you've got to be willing to do that. It's the grind. You know, if you follow, for those of you who are on Facebook, all these kids today love hashtag the grind. They don't know what the grind is. You know, but honestly, they don't know what it's like to have the ATO breathing down your neck chasing you for money. Back when I drew that bankruptcy line, I had the ATO freeze all of my bank accounts one day. I was in Brisbane, and it was a payday, and I checked, like most small business people who were going through tough times, I was checking my bank balances 3 or 4 times a day. First thing when I go up in the morning, just in case something changed, and all through the day. Anyway, through the day, I had all these amounts in all the different accounts, and available balances were all zero. And I thought, shit, something's gone wrong here. So I ring the accountant, he doesn't know, and I ring the bank manager, and she doesn't know. And after some ringing around, we find out that the ATO's frozen and everything. So I had to ring the ATO, I had to speak to them. I had to tell my staff there's been a glitch in the banking system, i.e. I owe the ATO money. I don't need to tell them that. And basically, how I got out of that was I spoke to the ATO, and they said, if you can prove that your wages come out of the account. So I've got 9 people who are expecting wages. So these are 9 people who've got mortgages, who have got kids who I need to pay. And so they said, if you can prove that your wages come out of one of those accounts, we can unfreeze that account. And that's what we did. And I've never been that low since, and I hope to never get that low again. But that's business. Has anyone been in that situation? Yeah, that's business. And that's what you guys can learn off each other, is you can have those conversations. See, when people are in business, we've got to pretend everything's good. When you're on Facebook, you absolutely have to pretend everything's good, because why am I going to give you money otherwise? Particularly me, I run an adventure business where people pay between $6,000 and $12,000 to go on a trip, and they pay it 6 to 9 months in advance. Why are they going to give that to me if they think I'm in trouble? So the only luck I have, I guess, and it's luck in the adventure game, is people have to pay 2 months before an adventure starts. So I'm never in a situation now with this business where I sell something and I spend the next year trying to get money off you, because if you haven't paid, I just don't book your tickets. So I guess I'm a little bit lucky in that way now. But that's where I've been. The story I told at the LinkedIn conference is about this young kid here, and it has a business tie-in, so if I'm not going over time or anything, you can bear with me. This kid, he missed out on the AFL draft pre-joining the Army. He's a Man Geelong fan, and he missed out on the draft. He actually got picked up in the draft initially, but not by Geelong, and he was at the very low end of the draft, and so he elected not to play AFL football because he would only play for Geelong, and Geelong didn't want him, so for whatever reason. So instead he joined the Army. His name's Brendan, and he obviously lives in Geelong. He joins the Army and he's quite good at it, and in Afghanistan he's there for 139 days, and on the last day that he was there he got blown up. And so I took him to Kokoda. So you can't see it there, but his left arm got blasted through here, so it's all just frozen. You can bend from the elbow, but none of this works. It's just there. And his left leg as well. And they rang me up and said, he's still in the Army at the time, would you take this guy to Kokoda? He's only got one leg, 90% loss of use of his left arm and so on. And I said, okay, I've taken a lot of people to Kokoda. My daughter did it, as I said, when she was 8, and the oldest person I took was a 79-year-old woman. So anyone can do it. But it's a challenge. I took a guy called Damien Tomlinson who lost both of his legs in Afghanistan, and we had to do it with 2 prosthetic limbs, and that was really hard. But he did it. He was a Special Forces commander, had a right mindset. So I took this kid across, and he told his story, and he's I wouldn't say racist, because Muslims aren't a race, but he hates Muslims, and the stuff he writes on Facebook I don't agree with, but I haven't been through what he's been through. So other than that, he's a pretty cool guy. And so he was telling me, when he gets up and tells his story, he says, I had 138 good days in Afghanistan, I had one bad day. He told me the entire experience from the time he stepped on that mine and he got blown up. And he said explosions have been going off all day, and he was laying on the ground because he got knocked to the ground, which regularly happens with explosions, even if they're not near you. And he was laying on the ground and he thought, shit, someone's copped it. He didn't know it was him. He'd already lost his leg at this stage, but didn't know. So then he went to get up, obviously, and he only had one leg, and he fell over and he looked down and he went, shit, like he realised it was him. And so he goes through that whole process. It took 20 minutes for him to evacuate him. They were in -5-degree temperatures, and the bones of his arm were open, and the cold air hitting it, he said, the pain was that intense that they were pumping him with the morphine that would normally kill you. But the pain was that intense it was not doing anything for him. And they chopped him out of there. He got put onto a plane and he flew to Germany where they did his amputation and worked on his arm. And he just took us through that whole process of what it was like when he came out the day before Christmas and his mum was sitting in the room. They'd flown her over and all those sort of experiences. But more important than that is he came home and he said to his fiancée at the time that, look, because they were really struggling. For 2 years he struggled with suicide, and he said, when I get my payout, because the army gave me $200,000, for getting blown up in Afghanistan and for getting kicked out of the army, they pay you about 230 grand. So that's not a lot, and you get some pension and stuff, but to be honest, it's not a lot for what these young guys give, I guess. So he said to his wife, as soon as that money, or his fiancée at the time, as soon as that money goes in the bank, I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to leave all that money to you. And he was very serious and adamant about it. He's a very, very driven guy. And they went through a whole process of her working with him, and now they're married. They came out the other end of that. And he's studying to be a CPA, which he hates. And he said to me, I freaking hate it because he's not a book guy. But in life, when something goes wrong, you've just got to do something. You've got to get up and do something. So he's studying to be a CPA, and he works with us at Mates for Mates. My point about him on Kokoda is we took him to Kokoda, and I took Alyssa, my daughter, over, and she one-on-one with him, because whenever I take an amputee, I have to have someone work with them directly because they're whole different challenges. And I'm taking another amputee in October. With their leg, they have a sock that they put over their leg that's like neoprene because their leg changes shape. They have 6 different socks, and that's what attaches that leg. So it's just literally suctioned on with this neoprene cap. And every day, 4 of those would get wet. And then he'd sit there all night trying to dry them. He was up until midnight trying to dry these socks out. And because you couldn't give them to the local guys to do, because they'll dry your boots and socks for you at night, but they'd regularly burn your boots. He couldn't afford to have these socks that go over his knee burnt. And he said to me on day 2, I'm really struggling to get these dry. I'm up until midnight, and then we're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's still not getting his socks fully dry. If all 6 of them end up wet at any stage, you're going to have to evacuate me off the track. Because once they're wet, the leg won't attach and he's done. So I said to him, well, what do we do? Like, what's the answer? And if I'm coaching someone, that's the first question I ask is, what's the answer? Because to be honest, you know the answer in your own business sometimes, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not, if you're willing to search for it. So he had a pretty simple answer. He said, well, all I'm going to do is if I can get up early, and if Alyssa was with him, and if we can just go all day, I'm going to skip morning tea, I'm going to skip lunch, and I'm going to get into camp as early as I can. He was getting into camp between 2 and 3 hours ahead of the rest of the group. They gave him 2 or 3 hours in the daylight and time to get his socks dried out, and by 8 or 9 o'clock he was able to go to bed and get some sleep, which is a pretty cool outcome for him, and he made it across the track. Every day, a guy with one leg beating you into camp by 3 hours. Why? Because he had a big enough reason to do that. And so when I talk to people around a business sense, and you're having challenges and things are going wrong, that's what I say to them. You know, everyone thinks that they want to leave early, or everyone thinks that they're working hard. I regularly talk to people who say, in business who say, I'm sort of stuck, I've tried everything and nothing's working. Has anyone ever thought that? Everything. Like my first response is everything. You've tried everything. Like, really? Who can honestly say that? So then I'll say to people, well, list the things you've tried for me. Like, well, probably not everything, but hundreds of things. No, that's cool, list them for me. And if we keep going through that question long enough, well, I've tried 3 things, and I've tried them over and over and over, and I'm just not getting a result. He could have sat there and whinged about it. He could have sat there at night. He could have asked the porters to dry his socks out for him. They could have burnt 1 or 2 of them, and now we're in real trouble. But instead, he just made a decision to actually do whatever it took. So sometimes in a small business, and small business is the toughest thing to be in this town and in this country. Even medium businesses are tough because the ATO doesn't give a crap about you. They don't care if you employ 5 people. If you employ 300 people, the ATO will have a different conversation with you. But for us in a smaller business, they're not as interested in what we do. Pay your bills on time or they'll shut you down. That's just the way they work. So I say to people, sometimes you've got to be willing to skip morning tea, skip lunch, be the first in, be the last to leave, dry your socks off and just keep going. And that's business 101. And that's what I take out of these sort of trips. Every trip I go on, I learn something about people. And I learned something about this young guy, and I still stay in touch with him. Because he's taught me more about what it takes to succeed in life than all the fit and healthy people I've taken to Kokoda. I took the Hawthorn Footy Club, or 3 times I've taken them across Kokoda, because they build themselves off courage, endurance, mateship and sacrifice, the 4 pillars of Kokoda. And yet this guy showed me more in his one trip. Because, you know, when it comes to business or life, when things are going easy, anyone can look like a rock star. But when the shit hits the fan, that's when someone's got to step up. And for you guys as small business owners, you are leaders. And I don't care if you work for yourself, there's 5 or 10 people in your business, whatever. You're leaders, and there's someone looking at you guys for some sort of motivation and answer. And sometimes they got no idea that you don't have the answer and you don't know what the hell's going on. But if you look at yourself hard enough, you'll come up with an answer and you'll lead them out of that. And I just like this quote because I think it really sums up what Brendan was about, that, you know, he couldn't do anything about his circumstances. He couldn't do anything about having stepped on that bomb. When he was over there in Afghanistan, he said one guy jumped over this thing and landed, the next guy jumped over this thing and landed, and he said, I jumped over and I thought I landed in exactly the same spot. Clearly he didn't, because he set the bomb off. That was a difference, you know, 1 centimetre of the way. So he can't do anything about where he's at now. He can fold up and kill himself, and sadly a lot of these young veterans are doing it, or he can just say, all right, this is the start point. For me, not quite as dramatic. It was that bankruptcy line. That became my start point. So I decided if I was ever to write a book about my life, and not to bore people with my life, but I wanted that to be the worst point, the lowest point. Okay, I don't have any rags to riches stories. It's not about that. I'm just saying, if I ever had to draw a line, it was going to be, for me, that this possibility of going bankrupt. If I was going to go out and go bankrupt, I was going to go out fighting. I was going to stand up and give it everything I've got. You don't just take the easy option. For him, he had less options than me. He was blown up. He kills himself, which is what he wanted to do for 2 years. Or he dries his socks and he just keeps going. He failed his last 6 months of his CPA course as a site. And he was really shitty because he said, I hate the course anyway, but I don't know if I want to do another 6 months again. Anyway, after some conversation he's doing, and I'm sure he'll pass it. He just doesn't like it. So he gave a really good speech. And I said to him, you know, you do really good at public speaking to corporates if you could take the F and the C word out of every single sentence. Because I've never heard a bloke, actually, I've heard one girl swear like him, but never a bloke. I took these minors across once and these girls were out of control. So this is a really cool video that I'm not going to show you. And it's just, oh, there is sound. Where's that coming from? The sound's probably too far away, but this is just some of the people I've taken on Kokoda, I guess. I started corporately running Kokodas. That was my daughter when she did it in 05. I took a sort of group, Ian Knox, I don't know if people know Knoxie, Michael McNabb. Took all these doctors and their wives. Andrew Tilley from Tilley's Crawler Parts came to Kokoda. It was the toughest Kokoda we'd ever done. It rained from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day on the trip that Andrew Tilley did. Does anyone know Andrew Tilley? From Tilley's Crawler Parts. He's a really cool guy. Oh, there he is there. So I took him to Kokoda and he hated it. Well, he liked it, but he hated it. And his daughters wanted to go, and they were 14 and 16 years old. And he told them how horrific it was. Anyway, I ended up taking them. That's a cassowary that guy's got. I ended up taking the girls to Kokoda. It was the driest trip I'd ever been on. And they said, Dad, I don't know what you're whinging about. It was pretty bloody easy. But his trip was tough. So the large part I get out of doing things like Kokoda is these kids have nothing in these villages. They live in grass huts still. It's like you're going back in time. They'll make bridges to cross rivers. That's how they live. Sometimes they're on the ground, sometimes they're raised. That's Dennis Duffy when he owned Ray White did that. And you know, you can give these kids a tennis ball or a soccer ball and they're as happy as they could ever be. And I mean, you'll give a soccer ball to 10 kids and they're happy. Try doing that next Christmas. Give your kids or your grandkids one soccer ball between 10 of them and see how you go. I don't reckon it'll have the same reception. It's all relevant to where we're at. These kids will kick the skin off that soccer ball for a month until I come back next time and hopefully give them a new one. It's all about perspective. So everyone I take to Kokoda understands that perspective. And Kokoda's a really tough trip. I do trips a lot easier, a lot more relaxing. The dog sledding one in the Yukon is the only trip I put weight on because the dogs do all the work and we just eat and drink. So it's not a bad trip. But this trip is hard work. Does anyone know anyone that's done Kokoda? If you ever talk to them, they'll tell you how hard it is, or they should, if they're being honest. And the further they get away from it, I imagine it's like having babies, then you think it wasn't that bad and they'll do it again. But Well, on a normal trip, which is just a fairly even time frame, it'll be 10 days from the time I leave Australia to the time I get back. And then we'll spend an overnight in Port Moresby, so we'll do the trip in 7 days. So, and a large part of it is about teaching the military history. Like, you know, Gallipoli's got a pretty good history for us in Australia, but it was a defeat. It doesn't matter how we sort of put that. Kokoda is 2.5 hours north of Brisbane. That's how close it is. There were 24,500 Japanese fought against 4,000 Australians, and we beat them. Like and yet most of the Australians don't know that story. If people have heard of Kokoda, they've heard of it because of trekking. They actually don't understand the story that happened there. So to me it ties into, you know, hard work and leadership and what they did to overcome the Japanese on that victory. You can understand now why getting his knee wet or his sleeve wet, and you're wet constantly on Kokoda. I just liked that. I thought it was a good business idea. You don't have to walk Kokoda or do something that extreme, and it is pretty extreme. It's tough. You've got to train for it. I make people do a minimum of a 12-week training program. You don't have to do something like that to get something out of life, but you've got to challenge yourselves in some way, shape or form. You've got to challenge yourself. You've got to get outside of your own business sometimes. You know, that work on your business, not in it, which I say is a bit of a joke. It is at some point in life you can do that. But you still have to do things outside of your business. You have to find things that challenge you. Blokes are the worst for it. Like, I don't do things because I don't dance, I don't, you know, whatever, until they have a few drinks and then they dance, or they think they can, I don't know. But we tell ourselves we can't do things. And they're just stories that you've told yourself that have been given to you through your time. They start when we're kids, and you'll do it to your kids. We try and make our kids safe. So don't run across the road, that's probably a good thing to teach them. But some things we put on, it become a glass ceiling on kids. And then that's something that you're now carrying around with you. So leadership to me now is about leading yourself first. Don't worry about the rest of your team if you haven't got your own shit together. Get yourself together, challenge yourself, go and do something. Seriously, in the next week or the next month as a minimum, everyone in this room should go out and do something that makes them really uncomfortable. And you'll find out it's nowhere near as bad as you think, and it'll have a carryover effect into your business.
How do you go have you got something there if somebody gets hurt or patient's sick or something like that? Have you got communication with the telephone in there?
Yeah, I carry full satellite tracking devices with me. So I don't know about every company that works over there. I really don't know, because a lot of them are budget companies and I'm not. But my specialty in the Army was aviation medicine. So I'm a registered nurse by trade, and I specialise in Black Hawk and Iroquois evacuations. So I have a helicopter on standby in country. They don't have a medical helicopter per se. So you've actually got to organise to have one on standby yourself, which costs you about $5,000. It's not cheap. But then other people can hire it, but I get first call if I need it. $5,750, all inclusive in international flights, a lot. So we do flights, insurances, meals, accommodation, group porters, tents, backpacks, sleeping bags. All you got to turn up is in your clothes and your toiletries. We do the rest for them. So we're a full service company, but you can do it as cheap as $3,000 and organise some of those things yourself. But you know, I don't know why you would do that, but it's not for me. But yeah, you see, when I first started on Kokoda, there were 4 companies operating over there. Now there's about 50. So, and anyone in business knows that competition can be really intimidating sometimes. Competition doesn't really worry me. You've just got to be really good at your own stuff and not worry about what other people are doing.
How many do you take normally?
15? Yeah. So I take a 15 and I have 2 Trek staff, myself and one other. And all my Trek staff are all ex-military or some current military. You know, my main guy that I work with now, he was blown up in Afghanistan as well, but he's pretty whole. He lost a bit of his hand and some shrapnel wounds, but it actually started out as a part of his treatment and so on, and now he's become one of the best Trek leaders I've got. I'm a really big believer in business, in developing staff and developing my team. I employ people for attitude before I employ them for what their qualifications and qualities are, because you can teach them that stuff. I can teach people to do stuff in my business, but you can't teach attitude very well. If people have got a crap attitude, they're just going to have a crap attitude. So. Yeah, sorry. I'm happy to. I could talk all day, seriously. So if I'm boring anyone, just do some push-ups or something, get your blood flowing. Sorry.
Two more questions, and we'll call it all right there.
Did one of you girls have something then? Absolutely. One thing you learn about in the military, we deal in life and death in war zones, and I've been to a few. And so we have this thing where we have to be able to trust every single person in our circle. And if one of them, when I first joined the army, and if I offend people with anything I say, that's just life, because I'm just going to be honest with you. When I first joined the army, there were three things you could be discharged for immediately. Homosexuality was one, so if you were gay and they found out, you'd be discharged. Drug use and theft. Out of those three things, there's only one that remained, and that's theft. Because drug use, we can try and rehabilitate you. We spend all this money training you. There's a reason that something's happening. So we've tried to work out the source of the problem. Homosexuality, really, does it stop people being good at their job? No. But theft, what it does is it erodes the confidence in my team. So if there's 10 people in my team, which there is in a section, and someone's stealing, we don't know who it is, and we fight in two-man weapons pits, I've got to trust that person beside me. And you've eroded that trust in the group because I think someone's a thief, and I'm starting to look around for that. I'm not putting my life on the line with that sort of thing. It's just not acceptable to us. And that's why handshake deals mean something to us in the military, and not so much to me in Civvy Street, as I found out. But you're right, if you get one bad person in a group, they'll bring the whole group down. And I've had that experience in my businesses, and I've just been coaching Channel 7 of all people, and they've got a really big corporate group. They're having a slight problem there with the cameraman who's just got a really crap attitude, and they've had a couple of good female presenting staff leave because of what he's done to them. And I spoke to the managers, and I said, well, what's the answer? Well, we can't get rid of him because he's been here 30 years and he's really good at his job. I said, who cares? You've got really good young staff coming through who aren't hanging around. If I've got a crap staff member and I can't fix them, they've got to go. They absolutely have to go, because I don't need them to create that problem for the rest of my team. And I don't care if your team's 5 people or if it's 100 people. You've got to be able to do that. And they still haven't got rid of this guy. Now they want me to coach him, which I'm happy to do. But, you know, if he doesn't perceive he's got a problem, it's a really difficult thing to coach someone around. But you're right, if someone has a crap attitude, they'll bring the whole team down. So they'll sit in meetings, they'll give you nothing in the meeting, and then when you leave, they'll start to try and undermine everything that you've said to the team. So you get rid of them. You know, there's a small-time hurt. In the personal training business, when I had Fighting Fit, if you get rid of a personal trainer, they're like a hairdresser. Half their clients go with them. I'd still prefer that than to have someone crap in my business. So, and it's the same thing. I had all of my trainers contracted, and those contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on, really, because they cost a fortune to enforce. And so I don't really know why we do it. But if you came to me and said, I'm thinking about going out on my own, I would tear your contract up now and off you go. And I had a few people say to me, I'm thinking about going out on my own. I say, do it. No, that's fine. And they go, oh, but the contract, no, I'll tear it up. All I was doing was taking their one excuse away from them, and they ended up staying up the time, whatever. But they were trying to say, I really want to go out my own, but he's not letting me. No, I'm happy for you to go. Because the business can regenerate itself. I can train someone to be really good. I hired a 17-year-old girl a couple of years ago, right before I sold Fighting Fit, and she turned out to be the best trainer we ever had. She now works for Christy at Christy's Angels. She's got a massive client base. She's 19 years old, best investment ever. You know, you just got to invest some time in people. You know, most people don't work for you for money. You know, money's a small thing. Like, we all need it. But most people aren't coming to you. If I'm meeting with someone and all they want to know is how much they're getting paid, they probably don't fit into my business. I want people to come in and make themselves valuable. My biggest complaint when I go and coach people is staff that sit and whinge that, oh, someone got promoted above me and this happened and that happened, and the boss likes him more. No, maybe he's just better than you. Maybe he's got more educated. Maybe he's gone out and made himself more valuable to the business, because as a business owner, I'm going to look after the person who's most valuable to me. And just the fact that you've been here 2 years longer, if you've done nothing to make yourself more valuable, that's why he got promoted over you. People don't like to call bullshit on themselves. That's just a fact. Sorry, mate. All right, guys, thanks for that.